Hey, this is Sean Pickett. I'm the founder and CEO of Sales Integrity, a B2B tech sales coach, and your host for the Sales Integrity Podcast. I'm ready to make it another great podcast today. And with that, let's get today's episode rocking and rolling. Welcome back to the Sales Integrity Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Pickett. I'm really excited about interviewing our guest today, Phill Keene. Phill, are you ready to add some wisdom today to Sales Integrity Nation?
I'm ready. I mean, let's get after it for sure.
Awesome, Phill. Well, thanks for being here today. Real excited after our initial discussion when we prepped for the call last week and then doing some research on you. I'm real excited to ask you some of these questions that we got here today. Of course, I'll ask you some of our standard questions. But I've got some unique ones really queued up just for you, Phill. So hopefully you brought your A game today.
I'm excited. Thanks for having me on, Sean. I'm excited to get after it and have a good conversation.
Great. Well, let me start where I always start. Nobody can introduce you better than you, Phill. That's my philosophy. So instead of me going on and on reading off an introduction, I always like to allow our guests to introduce themselves. So talk a little bit about who you are, how you best serve the sales profession today, what you're doing, what your company does. It's your chance for the audience to connect with you, get to know you before we start asking you some questions.
Yeah, so I am Phill Keene. I've been in sales for over a decade now. Been in sales technology for about 5 years, so I've lived in this world. I eat, sleep, everything, talk sales all day long, every day. I always joke, because I feel like I got an MBA in sales because I've lived in the world and it's all I consume and it's all the information that I talk about, and every day I talk about sales leaders and with sales leaders. So that's kind of been my world for a long time. I'm passionate about it. So I actually also have a podcast, which is Real Sales Talk. Yeah. So right now, currently I'm director of sales at Costello, which is a deal management solution. And we can get into more detail later because I think we're going to hit on some interesting topics, hopefully, and it might come up. But that's my bio, who I am.
Great. And one little quick fun note. The website is andcostello.com, right?
Yeah, ANDCOSTELLO.com.
So I bring that up. Is that a little play on Abbott and Costello? Is that what that is?
Yeah, it is. It's funny. So when we first went into early stages of branding our product, people that were using it as early adopters, they loved that it felt like a person on the other end helping them out, kind of as an assistant. So they kept referring to it as like a he or she or a person. So naturally, we gave it a person's name, which is Costello. So awesome. It worked out well.
Very good. Love the play on words and the humor. You got to build some humor into that, right?
Yeah, awesome. Absolutely.
Very cool. All right, Phill. Well, let me start with my first question that I ask all my guests. As you know, I named my company Sales Integrity. This is the Sales Integrity Podcast. So I always like to ask this question. How do you, Phill, define sales integrity, or what it means for a sales professional to demonstrate integrity while selling?
So I think this is really simple. I was at a event last night and someone asked a very similar question. And in my opinion, what separates really good salespeople from the rest of the pack is when they say they're going to do something, they do it. Mm-hmm. When they're going to follow up, they follow up, and they're very good about it. And that would be how I would define integrity. When you say you're going to do something, you follow up on it, and you have to be honest about what you're doing. Good.
Very good. Yeah, there's lots of studies on follow up, follow through, and just how many salespeople give up after one touch point, two touch points. Yep. Astounding. The lack of follow through, by sales professionals. But so by simply applying professional persistence, following through, following up, and doing what you say you'll do, as Phill says, very sound advice. And I would agree. So that's great. Great start so far. So in looking at your website and going through there was a lot of good research and studies, very well laid out, helps me understand, and sure helps your audience understand kind of where your position, what your company does. But one thing that stood out was this research that you guys came up with or found and cited on your website, which is this: teams invest $12 billion annually to increase activity volume. So teams invest $12 billion annually to increase activity volume, yet your bold proclamation, as I'll call it, on the website says doubling activity doesn't double sales. Can you elaborate?
Yeah. So first, let's think about that $12 billion number. So that $12 billion number is not CRM. at all, right?
Mhm.
That is all tools that basically bolt onto the top of CRM. And what we've assumed if over time, over the last 5 to 10 to 15 years, is that if we just do twice as much and we just do it faster and we just run a little harder, that if our close rate just stays at 20% or 15% or 40%, whatever your close rate is, like if we
Mhm.
just do twice as much, we're going to win twice as much business. Unfortunately, that's not true.
Mhm.
And I'll take it out of the world of sales to make it easy for everybody listening at home. So think about the world of let's use cars as an example, right? There's still a human element that operates that vehicle, right? And inside sales of that world, right? So there's still a human that sits at a desk that picks up a phone that has a conversation.
Mhm.
So as we sped up cars and we went faster and faster and faster and faster, and now you're able to take a car to 150 miles an hour, 180 miles an hour. We start to put safety procedures in place. We put airbags in, right? Analog
Mhm.
brakes, power steering, all the things to correct the human inside the car. When like the faster that we drove, right, the easier it was for us to control it. And it's essentially what we've done in sales over the last 10 years, 20 years is we accelerated it, made us go faster, but we forgot to put those analog brakes and those power steerings in and those things that kept the humans safe to not make the mistakes that they're making. It's way too easy. I always call it the oh shit moment, right? When somebody answers the phone finally, you're like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to do that. Or it's like you just often overlook the simple things when you're having a conversation where it's, I was supposed to ask that one question
Yeah.
today. I was supposed to, or oh man, I know that I want this deal to close in 2 weeks, but I can't even tell you what their compelling event is. Like the little things that we're supposed to do in sales, we just overlook it. And it's not because we can't, right? It's because now we're managing twice as many opportunities. We're doing we're doing 550, we're doing 700 calls, we're doing 1,000 calls in a week because we have this technology that lets me rip through calls. Like we're
Mhm.
doing all of this stuff, but we're not controlling the other side of that paradigm, which is the actual quality metrics there, or the quality of that conversation, or whatever the things you're working inside of a deal are.
Yeah, very interesting. So that brings up my next question for you. When you talk
Yeah,
about all this volume of calls and all that stuff. So when we spoke last week, you were in the middle of your Indy 500. You
yeah.
want to describe what the Indy 500 is and talk a little bit about that?
So the Indianapolis 500 is near and dear to my heart, right? We are based out of Indianapolis. If you guys don't know anything about the world of racing, it's a big deal. About
Mhm.
400,000 people show up to this thing. It's pretty epic. So if you've never been there, I recommend you coming to the IMS and checking out the Indy 500. It's awesome. I'm even repping my Indy 500 shirt because I knew we were going to talk about it eventually. But yeah, so Indy 500. The idea was I have a hypothesis, and I have this. I've done data, and I figured out the math, at least from my opinion, of people that work for me, for them to start to ramp up and feel good about prospecting, just the prospecting side of sales,
Mhm.
is it takes about 3,000 phone calls. And my team will make at the end of about 30 days, they usually got in about call it 800 calls to 1,000 calls, and they're starting to figure things out a little bit. Once they set 3 meetings outbound on their own and they've gotten to their about 1,000 calls, they've hit 30 days, whatever that time frame is, they're allowed to participate in the Indy 500 club. So they can go after it. And the idea is that you make 500 phone calls in a week. And right, myself, I need to join the club. So I went after it and tried to get my 500 calls in so I can also sign. We have a giant Indianapolis flag that you sign your name on, and I can't make a big deal out of it. And if you guys know anything about the Indianapolis 500, at the end of it, you drink a glass of milk. We also do that here. So we go out and buy a glass and you drink it at the end and you celebrate, right? So that's kind of the game. And it's more of a badge of honor to say you got through it. And also it's the mental thing of like, oh, I can actually get through this.
Mhm.
I can do this. So our entire team tried to go after the Indy 500 last week. We did it for a few different things, and we can go into those details. But yeah, it was fun.
So is that a sustainable pace? Is this hey, you got to do it one time, hit it for this week, really amp it up, but then, once you achieve that, you're up on the wall, you've got the milk you slammed and all this other good stuff, and now we can get back to a normal pace, or talk a little bit about, we talked
Yeah,
activity level, right? So this
yeah.
is continuing on with that.
So activity level really is like 25 calls on Monday, Friday. So we book in the week where you're doing a little more research, you're
Mhm.
organizing your life, and you're putting things together on Monday and Friday. And this is from the prospecting side for like SDRs, BDRs, that kind of world. Um, and then, right, 75 calls Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right? We average out about 50 calls a day. It's kind of what we're looking for. So
Mhm.
anywhere in that, like as long as you hit about 250 calls in a week, like we feel, right, with the math makes sense. And part of the reason why the entire team did it is we want to understand our math.
Mhm.
So we slowed down and had to figure out, okay, what would our conversation rate if we had this many conversations how would it yield to, how many meetings would we set, right? How many of those meetings would stick, which would turn into how many forecast opportunities, which then would turn into, hopefully down the road, we'll understand close one. So we want to get to that math where we understand, okay, if we put this input in, what would be our output, and essentially when it comes to revenue.
Yeah.
So that's what we thought about in that process, and we want to get back to that. And part of our product is we actually analyze the data as well. So we start to think about when this conversation pops up. So we actually tested a lot of messaging over the last 30 days, and then we were actually putting what we thought was the best actual conversation structure in place in front of the team. So we're testing it. So we start to look for things like, if, right, we have a conversation and we talk about these two things, what's our conversion rate? So we're looking at that type of data. We're adjusting our language on the fly to understand certain things. What we found is things like when I tell a story, right, in a story in a conversation, I convert at a 40% rate when a story is told in a conversation.
Wow.
So it's that kind of conversation that I can get into, like, hey, every time you should tell a story and have a conversation. That's the type of data that we're looking for at Costello, but we're really trying to push really hard and use our product ourselves and be the best users of our own thing. I like to say drink your own champagne. I will never say I eat my own dog food, right?
Yeah.
But it's that game of like, we want to understand that level of detail so we can get smarter. And it's a cycle, right? So we have a conversation at the end of the week. We talked about all the things that went well, and we adjusted our template at the end and said, all right, these are the things we should talk about.
Yeah.
And you have a good dialogue about it. And what you'll start to see is there's going to be reps that have trouble talking about a certain topic, or they never talk about a certain story. And then you can ask things like, why don't you tell that story? It looks like everybody else did. You didn't. Tell me why. Do you not understand it? Do you not know it? Like, those are things that you can start to coach on and have conversations about.
Yeah. So it's a process and a philosophy and a tool that enables that process and philosophy that, it's not a sustainable pace to do 500, every week, but that's something that amps up the amount of volume and data that we get to analyze it to make you better at the more reasonable level.
Yeah.
On a sustainable weekly basis. So it's interesting. And your tool, without knowing too much about it, analyze that. It serves up conversations. You guys can almost split test a little bit on folks made calls on this messaging, this campaign, if you will, and these folks did it on that one. This one was more effective based on your example. So it's almost like a money ball for sales.
A little bit, right? And we've had a good number of our customers try things like that. And it's actually kind of what gave me the idea, which was that they'd actually like launch a new division of a company or a new product line, and they would A/B test their product line with messaging. So I got really to places like, wow, I'd love to really think about us, right? So how could we iterate? How could we get better? And how can we get stronger in the things that we're positioning and saying? So it was super insightful, and it was a good time, and sharing that data back, like everybody got better by the end of the week.
Yeah. Great.
So it was great.
Drink our own champagne. That's got to be much better than eating your own dog food.
I will never eat my own dog food. I refuse to say that. So yeah, it's drink my own champagne for sure.
Yeah, where did that ever come from, right? I mean, it had to have come from Purina or something like that.
Somebody, yeah.
I don't know how it made its way over to sales and tech and all that other stuff, but everybody says it. It's just
really drink your own champagne. That's where I'll go.
Much better, much better. So ad hoc tools inevitably lead to ad hoc execution. That's another phrase that I pulled from your site. Can you talk a little bit about what that means, and where did the ad hoc tools? I think you have a little storyboard on that. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, so ad hoc tools, think about, so we'll take you back. So before we even wrote a line of code for the company, right, we did 40 to 50 hours of interviews with potential customers. They were account executives, and they were SDRs and managers and VPs and CROs and sales operations people and Salesforce admins and like all these different people that play a role. And what we had a tendency to find is a few different scenarios. And one thing that was really prevalent is salespeople in general, right? We're often required to, hey, here's 5 fields in CRM that you have to fill out every single time. You got to fill these out. Like, you got to put the data in there. And then what we found is that the actual, if you think about a giant iceberg, right? All the data that you really want to know, right? Everything that's below the waterline was actually sitting in their notebook that they wrote down in pen and paper. And they always, every time they had a phone call, they referred back to it on that notepad. Every time that they had a conversation, they would even if they went digital, it was sitting inside of Evernote in their computer. They would always refer back to that. And then the managers, crazily enough, right, would have a pipeline review. Like, Sean, I have these 5 questions for you. Tell me every deal you have and answer these 5 questions for me. And every single rep, like, we sat in so many pipeline reviews, and it happened so consistently, which was, hey, answer these 5 questions. And it was just a book report over and over and over and over about all the deals they were working. And the problem with that was you got nothing from it.
Yeah.
So we start to identify like, hey, if we can just make it easy for you to capture data by structuring your call, right? So you can take notes in it, capture information inside of it, grab a way to structure your call and how you capture data while you're doing it, and push that data back to the CRM for you, make it easy for you. We can solve a lot of problems for you. And that's really the core philosophy of what we have. So if you can put good inputs into the system, ultimately you can get better outputs, which is the analyzing the data that we talked about earlier, which is, hey, when I tell a story, what's my win rate? Or when I tell a story, what's my conversion rate? And then the outside of that, what we built is we built out like a deal dashboard. So it's why we're a deal management solution. And we give you a view of the world of all the opportunities that you're working or all the deals you're working. So you can visually see I have gaps in the deals that I have them working. So things like, hey, Sean, you said this is going to close October 12th, but you have no compelling event. Why do you think that's going to close?
Mm-hmm.
That's a much different conversation than, hey, give me these 5 questions and answer them about every single one of your deals. Like, we want to help you be proactive, know what to talk about, how to talk about it. And that's really what we're building the product around. But we have a tendency to see like a lot of reps in the world are building these ad hoc solutions that do that outside of Salesforce or outside of CRM and outside of these worlds that you want them to live in, because it's not built for them. Like, fundamentally think about CRM. It was built almost 35, 40 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. So CRM in the cloud. So Salesforce was built in 1999, and it was built for reps that lived in the field, right, to come back and take notes after their call or after their meeting. And adoption's been good, but it's not always been the most user-friendly tool when it comes to salespeople. So we talked about that $12 billion mark, right? We've accelerated the sales process. Mm-hmm. Now there are things like you and I are doing. We're having a Zoom video conference meeting.
That's right.
We're not even sitting next to each other. So I'm sitting here, I could take notes in Costello or whatever. It's like, I can do all these things around me. Mm-hmm. And I have so much more in front of me and available that I can do more and I can do faster. And we need to correct that side of the equation for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's almost these disconnected, disparate tools, Evernote and Word or whatever else they're using, whatever the flavor of the month is for a sales tool to capture cool data that got their attention. So they have all these disconnected tools that aren't integrated with CRM. They're off there kind of roguely taking their notes and capturing strategy around deals and all that stuff, but it's not visible to the leadership team and those that can support and coach that rep. So it's really those ad hoc tools inevitably lead to ad hoc execution. So it's almost these disconnected, sales cycles that you got going on within a sales cycle.
Well, right? Yeah. And you look at it too, like every single system gives you different ways that you can actually interpret the data. So if I take it in a notepad and you ask me to answer 5 questions, I'm just going to answer the 5 questions to be done. Mm-hmm. Or if I take notes in Evernote, maybe I have more notes or whatever system you use for digital note taking, right? I take more notes and I throw that into my CRM system. It's good. I might have more data or I might have more context, but I don't really have it organized in a way that I can actually read it and be unbiased in terms of my approach and just look at it and say, yep, I feel good or bad about this. I have zero confidence in what I see because of it. It's interesting to see what VPs look at. So imagine you're at a VP, a company, or a CRO at a company that has, let's even go 10 reps. Right. Mm-hmm. So maybe I have 10 reps and I have 50 deals a quarter that I'm working for each of these, or 50 deals in flight at one time. That's 500 deals that you're working at one time. Like imagine being able to like look at a deal screen and say, all right, I know this about a deal you're working, Sean. I don't feel confident about it. How can I help you? And this is why I don't feel confident about it. That's a much better conversation than, hey, Sean, come to your one-on-one and tell me the best feelings you have about all the deals you're going to work. It's all hopes and feels. Like I hate the sayings people say all the time, but hope is not a strategy, right? Like hope is not a strategy.
No, nope, it's not.
Hope discloses. Well, why do you hope it? Like have physical infinite like data in front of you that you can look at and be very unbiased about it, so you can have real conversations to move things along.
Yeah, and you're also being purpose-driven and almost predictable as much as you can be versus winging it and flying by the seat of your pants, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you mentioned in our previous discussion some quick hacks for sales professionals. I thought that would be fun if you shared one or two. What are some quick hacks that our audience can listen to and say, that makes sense. I'm going to go apply that right away in the real world of selling.
Yeah, so I'm a geek when it comes to sales stuff. So some of my favorite things. So I personally like this is part of the 500 phone call thing. Is I like mapping calls, and mapping calls is actually calling the executive assistants, and I actually use the words "Can I help you?" and instead of asking for anything else, or can I help you? Can you help me? Right. So, hey, Sean, it's Phill from Costello. Can I get a little bit of help? And the answer, like 95% of the time, is sure. What do you need? And then you're like, hey, I'm just looking for the right person to speak to you about X, Y, Z. And you don't tell them what your product is. You just kind of talk through what that looks like. And I actually had a podcast on predictable revenue. If you guys go listen to it, like it goes in detail for like 40 minutes about how I run this entire process. It's one of the best things I've ever done, is just learning the phrase, can you help me?
Yeah.
And it helped tremendously. Outside of that, like another hack that I really, really enjoy, I use a cadence that's slightly different. It's called the Crazy Ex cadence. And the idea is that if you have a crazy ex-girlfriend or crazy boyfriend or whatever that is, that the way that they would communicate to you is they would probably send you a message and give you time to respond. Maybe send you another message. And like over time, it gets more frequent and more invasive and more intrusive. But over time, it creates some urgency where finally, Sean, you're going to pick the phone and be like, hey, what do you need? Like, so that's always the way I've always communicated with the Crazy Ex cadence is like, I'm going to start off an email. I'm going to give you like a week to respond. Then I'm going to send another email, give you another 2-3 days to respond. Then I'm going to call you. Then you're not going to respond. And I'm going to send you another email, right? And over time, it gets more frequent. So over like 21 to 30 days, eventually at the end, I'm going to call you. And I'm going to email you in the same day. Then I'm going to call you the next day. And I'm going to call you twice in one day. And like it creates a sense of urgency where eventually it's like, I've seen your note. I know it. Like, hey, Sean, let's have a conversation.
Yeah. Interesting. So you're just dialing it up, like dialing up the pressure cooker a little bit as time goes. Very cool. Yeah. So that's an interesting approach. How successful is that? Do you measure that? I mean, you seem to be measuring everything. Have you measured that versus other techniques? And what does that look like?
So it does get better results. I can't tell you the data here yet, but where we're at, like where I had my last company, I had a lift about 15 to 20% per rep by switching to that cadence.
Interesting.
And the reason why is if you actually look at most cadences that are out there, is they're built very front heavy. So it's the opposite of that. It's I'm going to call and email you 15 times in the next 3 days, and then I'm going to slowly just stop talking to you. And most times after like 3 days, you stop completely.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how many conversations where I've had with my CEO where he'll get a really good email or I get a really good email. And we're like, this is actually a pretty good email. We'll have a full dialogue about that email that was sent from that person. And then we won't respond. It's not that we didn't want to. It's like, hey, I just didn't actually have time. But hey, this is pretty interesting. We should take a look at this one day when we have a chance. And then they'll like email me again, like, or call me the next day, like, and then just disappears forever.
Yep.
And that's the Crazy Ex cadence. It's like, let's send that really good email the first time to get the people to talk.
Yeah.
Let's send one more really good email and see if I can get them to talk about me again.
Yeah.
And then just educate them, treat them, teach them something. And then I call you, and then I call you more, and then I call you more frequently. Like, that's where eventually it's like, yep, you know what? I was interested to talk to you. That's for sure. I want to have a conversation, but you're respectful of somebody's time.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I study a lot of the touch points and sales cycles, and there's studies out there. One that we cite quite a bit that Microsoft conducted that 50% of salespeople give up after one touch point. 89% of salespeople give up after 4 touch points.
Yeah,
and so if you're making the 5th touch point, you're very likely one of the very few that are still remaining because you're persistent. And usually the sweet spot is somewhere between 7 and 12 touch points. I'm sure you've heard that before. And so what you're doing is you're thinking through a cadence and having, through a mixture of a combo approach of emails and voicemails, that you're going through. You're being very systematic about it and putting yourself into the sweet spot. But what you're doing, so I teach that as well. But what I like about what you're doing is you're shortening. You take a different spin at it. You're turning it on its head where most people, you're right. They just go and, boom, they're going to go and blow everything right up front. Let's get as much of it against the wall as I can. And then they disappear. Oh, they didn't reply. Right. And so it's almost a combination of those two where you've got the right amount of touch points, but you flipped it on its head a little bit, which is unique and different. Right. Yeah. Because I do hear this from CEOs that I go talk to. They're like, yeah, everybody and their brother uses the same techniques. It just wears on me. Right. So, lending credence to what you just said, Phill, they're like, if I just brace for it and let them sit there and pepper the heck out of my emails and email and voicemail, they're going to go away after a week or two. And then I'll never have to hear from them again.
Exactly. And this is the opposite of that. I think that's the approach. Is like, you really understand. And I will send this, actually, I have it, right? I have it on my computer. I will send it to you. If you email me, I'll send it to you within like 20 minutes. Like,
that'd be great.
So email me, Phill. It's Phill at and Costello, which we said earlier. It's AndCostello.com. I'll email it to you. Send me a note. Say, hey, I want the Crazy X cadence. I'd love to see it.
That's awesome.
I will openly share it to any of you guys. So it's been really successful for me, and it's for what you said. It's everybody communicates this way.
Yep, absolutely.
To a certain set, like every salesperson communicates this way. The way that everybody else you communicate in your life communicates the opposite way, which is I'm going to be respectful. Hey, Sean, let's chat. Like, think about your friend that you want to grab coffee with. Sean, let's grab coffee. You don't respond. Like a week later, be like, hey, Sean, how about that coffee? And then it's like, hey, Sean, I'll call you. Like, Sean, hey, I just wanted to check out and see if coffee works next week. And then you don't respond, I'll leave you a voicemail. And like over time, it's like fiercely like, Sean, like let's get together. Like, let's finally like think about that time where you finally broke. You're like, I know we gotta go. We gotta get coffee.
Yeah.
Like it became more frequent over time when it became more serious.
Yeah. Yeah. So just for the audience out there, those that are listening, first and foremost, what a gracious offer by our guest, Phill. So it's Phill at andcostello.com, and Phill has 2 L's in it, Phill at andcostello.com. So take him up on that. Reach out to him. He'll send you that sequence, that cadence, and I think that'll be hugely beneficial for everyone on the call. And I think that phenomenon works real well. If you think about what goes on in your personal life, how you communicate, that everybody's been in that situation where, we've been talking about getting together, and eventually this is getting ridiculous. We've been talking about let's do it, and we go back and forth real quick and get it done, right? So you're tapping into the normal psychological effects that occur in our own life and relationships. That absolutely translates over to sales, because after all, it's not B2B, B2C, it's H to H. It's human to humans. We are human beings interacting, communicating with each other, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for that. I love that. So let's shift gears. And these are 2 topics I talk about with all my guests, because these are just hot topics. I love to get the feedback from our guests on that. So let's shift gears and talk about social selling. That seems to be a real hot topic, taking the selling scene by storm, as everyone knows. So social tools like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and so on are they're gaining a lot of steam. People are using them. Sometimes people are only using them, right? So it gets a little dangerous when it's a single threaded approach. But what's your viewpoint, Phill, on social selling? How do you define it? Is it a thing? And what are some tips, or one tip that you can give to our audience out there of listeners on how they can make use of social selling?
Yeah. So I think it actually makes sense to start with what social selling is not, which is often what people refer it to. So a lot of times people think of social selling as, hey, I got this guy, like Sean and I right now are not social selling, right? But people would assume it is like, Sean's got a podcast, Phil's got a podcast. Like now he's on LinkedIn and he posts stuff all the time and he's always out there and doing all these things. Like he's all over the place. Like I always joke, like I always laugh, like my personal marketing strategy is to be everywhere at all times. But that's a marketing strategy. That is social marketing, period. Like it is not selling. You're not trying to do anything. You're just getting your name, your brand, and building awareness. That is it. So brand awareness, personal brand awareness is not social selling. So I think that is something where you can't look at, you can't go look at the best salesperson in the space. You can't go look at a quote unquote thought leader of the space and think that's social selling, which is often the common misconception. So then talking about what social selling is. Social selling to me is still just selling. It is building relationships and networking. It's the same way that I would communicate with you in social. It's the same way I would communicate with you via email, same way I would communicate with you via phone. It's just a driver. I think if you think about the world, I know my strengths. My strength is I want to get you on the phone. I want to have a conversation with you. So for me, everything I do, whether it's social or email or networking, is to get you back on the phone to have a second conversation or get you back to meet me face to face. And I think that's a lot of what you have to know your driver. It's just a tool in the toolbox. So for social selling, it's oftentimes building and networking, building relationships, and then using those relationships to then take your next step to the next person. And I think for social selling to be done right, you have to remove a lot of the heavy lifting. So think about if Sean were to reach out to me and want me to make an introduction, not that I'm super busy, but I don't have enough time to really think or can articulate what you're trying to do well enough. Where if you say, hey, I want the introduction to this person, can you say this to them? This is why they should have a conversation with me. I would probably willingly do this because I like you. I think it's something where it's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll make that introduction for you, Sean. That makes no problem at all. Like people make it often very complex.
Mm-hmm.
I think people are afraid to ask for an introduction. I think that's really social selling, is like introductions to their network to get the right talk, right conversation. I would tell you, starting at Costello, I've been here for almost 4 months, 3 months. I've set a very large amount of meetings via my network, which was, this guy, can you make the introduction? This woman, can you make the introduction? She leads sales at this company. I think we're a good fit. This is why we should talk to her. This is why I should talk to him.
Yeah.
And I'll get the introduction back to myself, and I'll have a good dialogue.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when I ask that person, and they're potentially a leader of a sales company, they're like, "Hey, I want to see it too. That's cool. Let me check it out."
Yeah.
And that's something where you're not selling to your network. You're not selling to your friends and family in social selling. You're really just building out your network, and you're like you would go to shake hands and kiss babies at any other networking event at night. So.
Yeah, and LinkedIn can be very useful for that. We coach salespeople at Sales Integrity all over the world, for that matter, and primarily in the tech industry. And we'll get some reps that have less than 500 contacts. They're not using LinkedIn as much, and so we start to work with them on that to leverage it. And they say, well, I've got a big network. I say, look, you may have as big a network, if not bigger than me, but I can execute on my network faster. Right, because of that tool. So it's going to slow you down. You definitely want to leverage it because of that. Another key point you made, I call it the Jerry Maguire approach. Help me help you, right?
Yeah.
Type of deal. And in this case, it's kind of in reverse. Make it easy for other people to help you, right? So they would say, help me help you. If you're going to ask for a referral, do the research. Don't make your strategic networking partner or contact or trusted contacts in your network go do the work and think of, how I'm going to facilitate an introduction or give you a referral. Go do that legwork. You can use LinkedIn for that. You can research it, type in your exact search parameters for your ideal client profile, and then see who in your network is connected to them, then reach out to them and say, can you facilitate an intro, as you said, Phill, to John Smith. He's the CIO, or he's the VP, in our case, the VP of sales at Acme Widget Corp. I'm just making that up, right? So don't everyone, start calling Acme Widget Corp. There's nothing like that. But nonetheless, and I go a step further. I have a whole method and technique on this. I call it conducting a network sift, and I put it out there. I've got a free video email course I put out there for folks, and our audience knows about it. But nonetheless, craft your messaging and even give it to them. So it's telling them, hey, could you introduce me, and here's why. Say, as a matter of fact, I created a brief little snippet. I'm going to email to you. All you got to do is copy, paste. And if you want to edit it to make it sound more like you, that's good. But you can just send, and I'll take it from there. So make it as easy as possible for people. And you really just echoed that by walking through, your viewpoint on social selling. It's just one avenue, for it. But it isn't just selling. It isn't just the only strategy, right? I mean, it's not just that, right?
Yeah, there's a pretty cool piece of technology. Let me confirm that that it still works. But there's a company called Outro that you guys should check out. It's outro.com, and Bubba Page was one of their founders, which I know he's out of Salt Lake City. Outro, it's OUTRO, and it's basically automates that platform. It's like you basically put in your value props, what you do, how you do it, and then you can basically blast out that thing to say, hey, Sean, this guy, or this woman. I'd love for you to make the introduction for me, and you can automate that a little bit. I think you have to still make sure you keep the authenticity in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that definitely helps there.
Does that integrate with LinkedIn? Or is
that's a good question. I actually don't know. So I just know it does exist in the world. I've not used it in probably about a year or two. It's just been a bit. I haven't actually set it up and used it for a bit.
Yeah, I'll go check that out. That's it. I'm always looking for, here you talk about the ad hoc tools, right? I'm always looking for tools and to research them if it can automate something, that you don't have to do manual. So that's a good recommendation. So our audience can go out there and evaluate that on their own. Phil's not endorsing it. He's just saying, take a look at it. There are tools out there that can automate some of these things we're talking about.
Yeah. And the one thing I'll touch on last in like the social selling world is it is not a short-term play.
Mm-hmm.
It is so much a long-term play. So honestly, for you to start with social selling is to start by just using the platform and know how it works, right? How people interact, how people have conversations, how people have dialogue. You can start to mimic some stuff and try it out, test it for yourself, see if it works. So one of our SDRs that actually work for us here at Costello, he starts to put out posts of just kind of the world and life that he had, and he's kind of funny. So I think there's some humor behind his post as well. And he told a story about how he just biffed it on the phone, and the person basically said, "Hey, I'm not impressed." Sam, hey, this is a sales call. Yeah, I'm not impressed. And we always laugh about it, right? But it was kind of that thing like, hey, we're all going through this, and the amount of engagement he had. And I hate the view metric, right? But he had tens of thousands of views in this, and he had probably 75 comments. He had a ton of people add him back on LinkedIn, where he was able to he actually set meetings. They're like, hey, I checked out Costello too. Like, this is pretty cool. Can I check it out?
Yeah.
That's the type of stuff where he didn't ask him, right? He gave value to his network, and the network basically reciprocated back. I think there's this whole world, like the law of reciprocity, right? If you throw something in the world, like, it will come back to you.
Yep.
And there's something where that's a long-term play where he's building his brand, who he is. He's building Costello's brand by being kind of a funny guy, talks about sales.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really interesting way to go about it.
Yeah.
So it's a long-term, like, you don't have to solve it overnight. Like, just start by, like, if Sean posts something and you like it, comment on it. If I post something you think it's great, comment on it, like it, talk back to interact with the other people that are commenting.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to ultimately grow your network. It's what you would do is, like, think about if you go to a networking event and there's two people having a conversation and you're standing there by yourself, but you want to, like, not be the awkward guy in the room. My hands, like, you join that conversation by kind of butting in and listening, and you're like, hey, yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah, I've actually, we had that same problem where, yeah, I've solved that before. I could tell you how I solved it. Like,
Yeah.
just, like, that's how you join a conversation. That's the same thing. Like, in social media, just join the conversation, just jump in. And I think once you lean into it, you'll definitely pick it up quickly.
Yep. Yeah. And it makes it it's easier because you're not in person. You could do it online and you can just kind of, put in your 2 cents on the same topic, and now you're out there, you're visible.
Yeah.
Right. And they take note of that. And, I always like it. One thing I like to bring up as well, and we'll end on social selling and turn to the next topic, but is, what a great opportunity to get into the mind of your prospective customers and into if they're on Twitter and they're tweeting, that's a great platform for executives because they like to keep it succinct anyway. So 140 characters or less, they pump that out there. You're getting into the mind. You're seeing what's on their mind and what they're tweeting about. And
Right.
they will notice, they'll get alerts and notice when someone likes it, shares it, comments on it. Same thing on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
So they'll know whether you like it, share it. And if you consistently save all your leads that you're going after in LinkedIn, especially if you're using Sales Navigator, and then you get information, brought to you, hey, one of your leads posted an article and all that. What a great opportunity to go out there, read it, make sure you read it and don't be disingenuous, right? Read it and have your point of view and then post something, because I can tell you author content, I author content. When someone likes it, okay, that's one thing. But when someone likes it and then posts a comment and starts to engage me in that gets my attention more than someone who just likes it. So just think through that. Put yourself in the shoes of the executive. What would get their attention? They are human beings, right? Everybody likes attention, especially when they've taken the time to author something and create it and put it out there in the world. So what a grand opportunity to make use of social selling, so to speak, in getting attention and creating awareness of you and your personal brand and your company, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're able to take the online to offline is what you're looking to switch to. And I talked about earlier, that's my personal preference. I like the phone. I want to use the phone all the time. I want to get you off of online to where you and I are having a conversation to, hey, can I send you an email? I'd love to stay in touch. Great. And then 3 weeks later, 2 weeks later, it's, hey, Sean, I'd love to actually sit down and have an actual conversation. And a lot of this times, like, it'll be very unbiased. Like, and I don't have an agenda. Like, I'm not trying to immediately sell to you. I'm trying to build a relationship. But it's sales guy to sales guy. What typically happens in a conversation or a dialogue is, Sean, so what do you do? Tell me about your company. Tell me about sales integrity, Sean. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, this is what we do. Well, tell me about Costello. Natural conversation. Great, this is what we do. They're like, oh, that's pretty awesome. We're actually looking to solve that.
Yeah.
That happens in conversation. So, you don't have to push so hard sometimes. Like, it's a long-term play with social.
Yep. All right here. So if social selling is all the rage these days, as we hear so much about it, then its chief rival that is equally as polarizing is the topic of cold calling. So let me ask you, Phill, is cold calling dead, as some of the pundits out there will tell you? And if not, where does it fit in today's mix of lead generation strategies?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm a phone guy. If I had to pick two things, I would pick social and phone, and I would let email die personally, right? That's just how I would operate and work. I think you could move faster with social than you can with email. I think that email is going to die a weird death until somebody figures out how to stop automating things and be a little more personalized. And then phone's one that I has a good shelf life right now. And it's for a lot of the reasons that you talked about earlier, right? So that executive that gets all those emails, like they just know that eventually you'll stop emailing me. Very few people actually pick the phone up and make an actual dial nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And there's companies out there that do, but very few companies really are hitting the phone and actually calling. Very, very small percentage of number of calls that actually come into a company in a given day is actually a sales call.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get a few here and there, but if you get somebody on the phone, the speed and velocity you can move something along on a phone versus any other medium is so much faster.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, I sell sales guys, so you and I can immediately have a conversation. I'm a type A, you're a type A, or if you're a disc guy, right, you're high D, I'm high D. Like we can have a conversation, and we'll get to the point really quickly, and we'll move on, and we'll move to the next step quickly.
Yeah.
So I firmly believe in being a phone centric company, not phone only, right? That's a different thing.
Yeah.
I believe in everything should happen: phone, social, email. I think everything like direct mail should happen. Right? All that stuff should happen in the process. But phone centric is really where my mind is.
Yeah, that's great. Phone centric, not phone only. I take copious notes, and I learn from my guests all the time. You've had some really some good golden nuggets here that I'll summarize in our show notes and
Yeah, thank you.
as well. But yeah, that's awesome. So I agree wholeheartedly. We're part of the reason why I was real excited to interview you is doing our previous discussion, and then my research of you is we're very philosophically aligned with that. I think anything in the extreme level is dangerous in my opinion. Whether we're not going to get into politics or anything else, but I tend to sit in the middle, right? And I like balance. And I like giving myself as many opportunities to put myself in a position to win as possible. And why would you go single threaded, especially if you're a sales professional, when you've got social, you've got phone, you've got email, you got strategic networking that you can go out and leverage. There's events. There's a variety of methods and techniques you can put at your, you have at your disposal. Why would you just go to one and have a single thread of failure or success there? So to me, I agree with you. I love the phone centric, not phone only, because I think that's dangerous too. Although I have a special affinity, for those that cold call and all that. I mean, that's how I built my career back in the 90s starting off. There was no internet. There was, but it wasn't public and didn't have a LinkedIn. It didn't have all that stuff as much. It was starting to come into its own. Email wasn't even a big thing as it relates to selling, right? So all you had was picking up the phone and cold calling, or going out in the marketplace and going door to door cold calling, or going to, leveraging strategic networking and events and stuff like that, which has always been tried and true all the way back to the turn of the, from the 1800s to the 1900s when sales methodologies were first coming on board. It's always about who, people will buy from people they know, like, and trust. And that comes from relationships, right? So to me, I have a special place in my heart for those that use the phone. But even that, I tell you all that to say, you can't just go phone only. You can't say, well, cold calling is everything and screw everything else, right? Because there are these tools that allow you to connect and get into the mind of the buyer and draw these real connections, draw them close to you through social, right? And then you've got the phone, and then relationships are in the middle. I mean, utopia is you're just getting facilitated referral and introduction after introduction, right? Well, you can do that by starting off with the phone, email, social, and have all roads lead to building those strategic relationships. And I always say this too: take your online relationships offline. If you're in a group networking event, take the group relationships down to the one-on-one level and go, meet with them one-on-one. So you should always take it kind of online or in a group format and bring it down to a one-on-one, offline format. So I'm wholeheartedly agree with you on that.
Yeah, so Trish Bertuzzi, so if you guys don't know Trish Bertuzzi, definitely look her up. But the way she quotes it, I'm going to butcher this, but I'm going to try it anyways. So she's like, there's no such thing as cold calling nowadays. She's like, really, you have to warm up the chill. That's what she said. I think that's it. Probably not. But yeah, so it's like, you got to warm up the chill. And what she means is there's so much information that's readily available for you to be able to start a dialogue about. And there's so much that you can do prepping for a call, and there's a process to do it efficiently at the same time that I can call you, Sean, and I know what to talk about immediately. Yeah. And that's not a cold call. It's a very guided, very, very methodical thought about, hey, this is how this works. And even as we made those 500 calls last week, which the proof that it actually works is that we had at least a 10 to 15% connection rate with every single person. We had people that were as high as 30% connection rate. So once they made $500, 30% of them answered the phone.
That's great.
Which the conversion rate was in some scenarios up to 40%. Like, think about that math, like the amount of meetings we set off of just hitting the phone hard and doing that. But it wasn't cold in a certain way, right? So it's still cold. Anytime I call you, even if Sean, I know you, it's a cold call, in my opinion, if you just answer.
Yeah.
But what we did is we segmented out the list where you knew this is our perfect fit for our customer. We know you're using these 2-3 technologies that work with us. So we know we can have a conversation about that. We know that you have specializations. We know you have SDRs, NAEs inside of your company. We know that you have at least 10 to 50 sales reps inside of your organization. We know that exists. Right? And we also know that you're largely inside sales based. So for us, like, we knew those things because we just wanted to test that pot of people, right? That little, I actually call the term small net fishing, which came from Serious Decisions. But we pulled in a very small list. And we said, let's hit this list because we know that we can say these things because it actually relates to them. And we get them on the phone, we're going to say this. And that's what we used to basically test our messaging. And it worked really well.
That's great. That is great. So small net fishing, Serious Decisions. I'll have to look that up as well. I know Serious Decisions, but wasn't familiar with the small net fishing. It makes logical sense as you lay it out. But what I love about that is, all roads lead back to preparation. We have a mantra here. We say, make your sales pop. Preparation, organization, productivity. If you're prepared, you'll be organized. If you're organized, it'll be a productive use of time. If you're productive, you'll move the ball forward and eventually, achieve your sales and income goals. So that's the simplistic definition of it, but all roads lead back to preparation. And you're right, and so is Trish. She's right too. Warm up the chill. There should be no such thing as a true cold call. The days of your manager coming in and saying, here's the yellow pages or a list of numbers, the good leads, the Glengarry leads, right?
Start at AAA and go. Right?
Yeah, there you go. Start dialing and smiling and dialing and reach out and don't do any research. I mean, that's just asinine, right? It's just ridiculous use of time. Go to social, do your social recon, do your research, understand, are there triggers, insights? At the very least, you could leverage social for that. You could leverage, this great thing called Google, right? You can go search and get all sorts of information, go to their website. So you're right, just with those tools alone and the information that's out there because of the great invention of the World Wide Web, you can go do all this research and you'll warm up the call just from that. But on the flip side, there's doing that small net fishing, isolating down here are the targets that match up with existing customers. Here that we're calling on the same executives that we're working with. They're going to have similar issues, challenges, issues, and goals that, our current customers have. And if we do the messaging right and we focus our effort in that, then that's going to warm up the call too. So these are great tips, great recommendations that you're walking through. It's great to hear others kind of have that similar philosophy and walk through all that stuff, because sometimes my audience hears it enough for me probably.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Great to bring you on and have you walk through that. So we are nearing the time of our end of our time together today. So, I mean, it flies by. I'm keeping an eye on the clock and trying to make this manageable in terms of time. But you and I could probably talk all afternoon. So that means one thing when we're ending the show here on the Sales Integrity Podcast. It's time for the sales cycle. Now, the sales cycle, as we're all familiar with, is what we all go through as sales professionals. But on our show, it's the name of our rapid fire question format that we go through and end the show with. So I'm going to ask you 7 questions, and it's kind of going to mimic and mirror a sales cycle. As you're going through a sales cycle, these questions will. And because we're competitive, we're on sales, we're competitive and like to win, I time it to make it fun. And our previous guest, Stu Schlackman, who's an author, speaker, trainer, author of the book 4 People You Should Know, set the benchmark with a 1 minute and 55-second sales cycle. So you think
that's impressive, but Stu, I'm coming for you.
All right, Stu, he's coming for you. You better be ready. So I'm queuing up our clock here. I'll get that over here. And I'm going to ask you the 7 questions. Of course, the time includes me asking the questions. That was the rules of the game, the way it goes. But we also like to balance value versus speed, right? So answer them as quick as you can, but don't do one-word answers because I'm probably going to make you elaborate because our audience needs to grab some value and be able to go apply that right away. So you ready?
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So I'm going to start the clock right now. Question number 1. Name a specific technology or tool you use for identifying and researching target market prospects.
So what we use is Datanyze for technographic information, and then we use ZoomInfo to find contact level data.
Great. Question number 2, what is the best method to initially get the attention of and connect with your target market prospects?
Crazy X cadence. You can email me. I'll send it to you. That's a pretty good answer.
Love it. That's a great answer. Question 3, what method do you use to consistently stay top of mind if your prospects aren't ready to buy just yet?
So where I would say is that you basically put them in some kind of list, some kind of tee-off list of yourself where I can reset meetings, I can nurture you, and I actually send them value-added emails on a regular basis that I curate myself. So as you're doing social selling, you're finding good articles, share it with them and give them context of why you send it to them.
Great. Number 4, what sales process methodology do you use to manage opportunities through the sales cycle?
Yeah, so we use technology. We use Costello to help with a lot of our deal management, but we also have Sandler methodology. We have a little bit of challenger sale and consultative selling inside of our process.
Very cool. Question 5, how do you define the concept of closing a sale?
Closing a sale actually usually begins once the signature happens. So you think about it's actually implementation, getting you working and making sure you're actually adopting what we built as a solution.
Great. Question 6, how do you know when it's time to close a sale for any given opportunity?
So I think that depends on the customer. So what we call is a mutual engagement plan. So it's understanding earlier what pain you're trying to solve, and then what timeline you actually have and what's the event that you need to meet. And that you can make that up in your time with that person, but you need to figure out those few things.
Great. And last question, what is your best advice for sales achievers to improve their closing ratio?
Learn as much as you possibly can and be curious in the sales process.
Oh, you just missed it.
Man, that was close. I tried.
2 minutes exactly. You missed it by 5 seconds.
That's good, Stu. All right, I'll let you have the belt.
Man, I thought with the way you were tracking it, that was good. Do you imagine how fast Stu was?
That's good.
You were obviously the second best we've ever had on it, but wow, 2 minutes. I thought we were tracking towards it.
I got long in one of them. I started going, but that's good.
There's only one of them I think you were long on, but that is awesome. So 2 minutes, that is really, really good. Awesome. All right, so let's wrap up the show with your number one piece of advice for complex technical B2B sellers who are the primary makeup of our audience here. So what's your number one piece of advice for them?
So I would say make it easy for them. What I mean by make it easy for them is do not make them do homework. Don't make them run to mental gymnastics. If you're going to offer a thing like a discount, right, do the math. If you're going to do something, follow up when you do it, right? Communicate with somebody how you'd like to be communicate yourself. So make it easy to buy from, and usually that'll help a lot.
Make it easy to buy from you. Help me help you, right?
Yep. Make it easy.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time today, Phill. I really appreciate it. And thanks to all the sales achievers out there who took the time to listen to today's interview. I appreciate it and look forward to everyone applying some of the wisdom that Phill shared today during our interview. So now let's wrap up today's episode with a few quick reminders. Real quick, before we end today's episode, I wanted to just share a few quick reminders with you. No matter where you listen to the Sales Integrity Podcast, please subscribe to it. Just subscribe to the show so you get them automatically on a weekly basis. The more subscribers we have, the more we're found out there by other potential subscribers, so that greatly helps the show. We are now on Stitcher Radio, so in addition to Stitcher, we're on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. And no matter where you subscribe or listen to us, please provide a 5-star rating and a quick 1 to 2 sentence review. That also helps others find the podcast. So help us grow the show. That would be great. And also, we still have our free 7-day video email course out there. You can go to mastercomplexselling.com to subscribe to that. So again, mastercomplexselling.com. It's a free 7-day video email course titled 7 Steps to Master the Game of Complex Technical Selling. So that'll do it for today. Go out there in the sales world today. Help your customers buy what they want, what they need, and what benefits them. And most importantly, go out there and make it a great day.